Okay, folks, here we are. Guess what? Chris
Dave's
Morrison
back.
is, yes,
Dave's back.
Chris has got the Oompa Loompa here with his blue sweatshirt looking like a crazy fool.
Hey,
So I
sweatshirt.
am,
This is a nice sweater, man.
no, it's not. This is a sweatshirt. I actually
Oh,
got my
your
sweat.
sweatshirt. I
Yeah, I'm
thought
talking about me. I look like the Oompa Loompa.
I got a nice sweater on today.
Yeah, you look good. You look
I'm looking
good.
sharper than usual. You're looking like a Oompa Loompa.
I look like a Oompa Loompa, yeah. The
Okay.
if you're a Willy Wonka fan, the woman, little girl who ate the blueberry thing and turned into a roly poly blueberry.
I remember. Though I don't think folks have come here to hear about Oompa Loompas today.
Yes, they have come here to
they
hear
have?
Oompa Loompas.
We're gonna talk
Yes,
Oompa Loompas all
because
day?
Willy Wonka was a product, man. He had a product, and he was sending out disruptive products and building disruptive products in his shop. Some of them he wanted never to bring out, so that's why they were all sworn to secrecy. And the kid won and got the business because he took the gum out of his mouth and didn't steal the secrets.
I don't remember that much of it. You must have
Okay. Well, anyways, he's a big product guy.
So Willy Wonka was a true innovator in this day, right?
Yay, chocolate innovator, candy innovator, man. Every one of those was innovative products that he was considering bringing to market.
There you go.
And then he enslaved the poor Oompa Loompas, which is part of the reason I don't like that, because they should have been allowed to be free.
And I guess the good segue to get us on track here is Willy Wonka's a story, right? And that's what we're talking. We have stories today, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Stories today. So, Chris is the big man associated with disruptive product launches, agile market entry. We're going to continue down the story path. And so what we want to do here is we want to teach through the stories, right? That's one of the best ways that we learn. So for the next, 28 minutes, we'll share some stories. If you want to share some stories in chat, please don't hesitate. If you have any questions for us, pop it in the chat. That's chat, but it's really the comment section for LinkedIn. And we'd love to hear from you. So Chris, tell us, we have 3 things: over the skis, failure in launch, my big ones. And I think there's one about the fact that you're not even going to try. You're just going to do updates on your current product. Which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with a story about over the skis?
Yeah, let's talk about Out Over the Skis. We've talked about this one before, but it's all, I don't know. I like the name of it anyway. Plus, I'm planning to go skiing in February. So
I just like it. It reminds me of Better Off Dead, the story with John Cusack and the skiing the K-12. Sorry, don't mind me. Some of our listeners may actually know that one. Anyways, keep going. So over the skis. Tell us a story about a disruptive failure based on over the skis.
So we kind of talked a little bit about this before. But what Out Over the Skis is getting ahead of yourselves, and this is, I think I said in another one of our live sessions that the number one problem I see is companies they don't address a problem that the market wants to solve. That's kind of the number one I run into. But the second most common story is when they go to launch is getting ahead of ourselves, is getting out and starting to scale up the sales and marketing.
But focus on the first one first, because I think that was important on the product side. So, you're too early. You're too early for what reasons? What makes people try to scale something that's too early?
So I think, and that kind of gets me to the story of the client I worked with a couple of years ago. But I think that one of the biggest things is we think the most important thing early on in the launch of product is getting revenue as quickly as possible. And of course, revenue is important. It's desperately critical. And I think that's one of the reasons. One is this fallacy that revenue is the most important thing right out of the gate. Number 2 is if you look at all the media around successful companies, it talks about how fast they're growing and all the growth. But also,
okay, that's my point. My point is it's driven by the hype.
Well, it's not just the hype, Dave.
That's my experience. It's driven by the hype.
It's hugely driven by the hype because that's the impression that we have for success in the world. But the other piece of it is the investors, VCs, and venture and investors actually drive this as well because they're looking for one thing. They're looking to get revenue to show a number that they can sell the company at.
I see 2 things that happen with this is the product team is confirmation biased They're driven by the hype, and they think that their idea is so hot it's going to change the world. But they never look, as you talk about, they never look at whether people actually want to buy it or not. So they don't spend the time doing the market entry research to see if it's even worthy of.
Well, first of all, this isn't worthy, right? That's the first piece. But then the second piece, even if it's worthy, how do they get the scale? To get the scale, you just don't start selling. You've got to have a process for selling in place. You and I talk about. But let's talk about the story. So the story is a client of mine that hired me in a couple of years ago. I'll just tell the story real quick. And these guys they're venture back. They had a product in the ophthalmic space, and right out of the gate, they hired a VP of sales. They hired a 10-person sales team, and they hit the ground running. They brought me in probably about 9 to 12 minutes after product launch. And the problem they were having is all their sales reps were underperforming, way underperforming plan, not even close. And when I went, and that could be a couple different problems, right? They could have hired the wrong people, right? Or there could have been something else. Well, when I went into the field with the sales team, I started traveling with some of their sales team, calling on clients with them. David, this was the best sales force I have ever met. These guys, they were brought in by referrals. So they knew people in the company already. They came in, they hired the best of the best. And these guys were, they were struggling. And when we started digging into it, what they had is they didn't know how to sell the product they had. They had they didn't have the tools they needed to sell the product. So that's when I talk about getting out of the skis. Companies launch, and then they go push. They scale up their sales and marketing, and they're not ready to scale at that. But they're scaling all their expenses, but the sales process isn't ready to scale. That's the challenge.
Yeah. So for me, it was I'm in the training space, so over my skis has been a lot of my mistakes, and what I had done previously is I had a repeatable, scalable model. So I would stick these new topic ideas into the repeatable, scalable model.
Right.
And even that model, although it could do innovation, it had to have a certain universe size, right? So I would do it like back in 2003, an e-commerce class or a intranet class, or back in the early days of Azure, do an Azure class. And, basically you get crickets because, you had sucked into the hype. You sucked into the fact that, this should be good. This should be hot. And then use, like you always talk about, use the repeatable process to try to drive it out. And then, of course, the repeatable process isn't going to work because our repeatable process was based on a certain universe size. In order for this repeatable process to work, there had to be a lot of people, not a lot, but there had to be enough people that knew about it, that wanted the training. And
because the teachings that you were doing, it was a newer, trendy type of cutting edge type thing. The people that were paying attention to that was a much smaller community at that point.
And it's even to the point where they're not ready to eat. They're learning it themselves in other places. So
there's two challenges in the repeatable process there, right? One is there a big enough audience to do broad marketing and get enough hits to win? That's, when you're launching disruptive technologies, the answer to that question is almost always no, right? It's a very small community that's going to be that early adopter, that's going to be at the cutting edge of things. So you have to figure out how the market selling to that community.
And our all those topics.
David, I'm gonna fight back with you. The other thing is timing. Timing is so
well. That was our thing, though. So each one of those topics, Chris, I just talked about, they all became decent training products, but we were like 6 years ahead of the time of the launch. And part of it again was we sucked to the hype. It was a product management driven company. It was a repeatable direct marketing system. And, if the universe size wasn't small enough, or if we had to educate the market. So what we should have been doing is we should have been out there evangelizing the topic so that we could watch to see if the topic had scaled. And then try to put, like you said, bring in the right sales process. And the sales process would have been a process of evangelization. to the
Or
point where go ahead.
there's lots of different things you could put in that sales process, right? You could have found a niche in the marketplace that was there very targeted that you could reach that community. Sometimes when you get niche and you go after those small communities, we've talked about that. That's a very good way to launch a product and get some early growth and scale. But
yeah, but there's also there's also tricks there, by the way. So my other story was voice over IP security. We went to a niche spot in the like early like 2008. No, it was sorry, it was 2005.
yeah,
And we got such an initial hot pop.
yeah,
But we didn't do the research to realize that that topic was being absorbed by other things. So we started off with a big bang. Holy crap. We were getting big class sizes, lots of interest. And within 6 months, it was completely gone.
and
Completely gone.
Why did it burn out like that?
Because the vendors just attacked it themselves. So instead of security being a separate item for this type of technology, VoIP,
right,
you could solve the security problem for VoIP in vendor and product, and it just became something that the product vendors taught, and someone didn't need to learn it from a generic standpoint. And then, but we didn't sit down and really think through that. And then we lost, like, for a small company, we lost like $80,000 because we tried to triple scale it. Because we looked at the repeatable process, we saw that it was working. In the direct mail business, you have to spend, 16 weeks before you get any revenue. And so we had a lot of money and everything just fell apart. It was crazy. I mean, I had never seen anything like that. But we should have been better prepared for it. And I actually had a fight with my business owner on this one, Chris. It was hilarious because I didn't want to do it. The thing is, I'm a bit of a wuss. At the end of the day, I think I'm a big gunslinger. I'm very risk averse. I'm a wussy. I shouldn't say that word, but you know what I'm saying. I'm a wimp. Oh, I lost Chris. Well, anyways, I lost Chris, folks. But that was the thing. It's like I don't like to take too many risks, and my partner really wanted to drive it. And the scenario there that occurred was, look at, I mean, we drove it, but we weren't properly prepared, and we lost $80,000. And the thing there is, again, the fact that I stuck a newer product and was managing it through the repeatable process. What really should have happened, instead of just letting the product itself go like we did, we should have spent some time digging around and seeing. Now, that's my hypothesis that I got rolled into other vendors because of what I saw, but we didn't actually do deep enough research to really see that. So as I was waiting for Chris to get back, another story I have, and this is the one I tell a lot of people around making mistakes. This one's the confirmation bias. This is the I know best problem. And our organization was really good at partnering with third-party vendors to provide, good housekeeping seal of approvals for our content, right? So, it's not just us telling you that this content is great. Somebody else out there is doing it. So this was the early 2000s. Security was, this was the late 90s, early 2000s. Security's hot as all can be, right? People are talking about it. My company is doing a phenomenal job at hands-on security training. And I'm like, okay, I see all this hands-on security training stuff going on. All right, we got to get a certification. They're hot. I want to get a certification that teaches people how to configure generically these systems. How do you configure a VPN? How do you configure a firewall? How do you do your routing tables associated with it? So I spent a ton of time finding a partner, connecting with a partner, and then ultimately setting up this certification. And it was absolutely insane how much work and effort I had to do. I'm like, this is nuts. So I'm finishing a story, Chris, and I'll pop you back in. So we go to market on this thing, the True Secure certification. Oh my God, it was the biggest bomb ever conceived. And here's the skinny. Nobody in the company understood it. We probably lost, I told the story before, and we probably lost $30 million because we didn't go after the certification we should have went after. And if we had some sale activity talking to security professionals about what they were looking for and bringing that information back, I wouldn't have made such a bad decision. So really, a lot of disruptive product failures happen because there's a strong product lead who really believes in what they believe in, and they go head first into it and don't listen to anybody else. And I did that. It was brutal. Then I learned to fall in love at making money instead of falling in love with the product. That's how I changed that. So Chris, you're back. What happened, man? Was there a tornado in Mebane? Did you like go to Oz?
Everything went down and I guess my system had to reboot. I don't know what happened, David, but
so it was a disruptive situation, not a product, but a disruptive technology situation.
It sounds like you had no problem filling this.
Oh, I was just talking. Even if there was nobody there, I was still talking away by myself. Who knows, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think that last one, David, that you were sharing about, man, that's one of my mantras. And over the last 20 years, we've gotten really good about customer discovery and going out and getting voice of customer. And, Steve Blank has led that way. The Lean Startup, a lot of it has led that way. And there was a huge improvement in going to market with products by using some of these tools. I
did it for that TrueSecure example.
I know, but so you didn't go for that. But there's another step that people don't forget about, and it's why they built the MVP model, that you get that increase in quality of the data from the market as soon as you start selling, because everything people tell you during customer discovery, as soon as you start asking for money, the story changes.
Well, Chris, that whole story of TrueSecure led to my development of the MVP model starting in 2005 at ASPE.
Yep.
That I was able then to protect myself from confirmation bias because I threw prototypes at the marketplace. Now, again, it still didn't protect me from going too early because then I would cut bait and not dig back in. But it protected me from a massive failure like I did with TrueSecure. We should have done the CISSP certification in a way we would go. But I got what? Go ahead.
You're not going to avoid mistakes, but what happens is you avoid the cost.
That's what I did. That's what we did. I said I'll take the stupid e-commerce and Azure mistake over taking the TrueSecure mistake, because I can always go back and do those things if it pops back up.
Now, David, one of the things interesting is a lot of our audience is in the med tech life science space, and I was just talking with someone that's in the product development side of the med tech life science. They said, well, you can't use the MVP in the model in our space because you have to go through FDA clearance, and that's completely wrong.
Yeah, I think
they think about you've got to do it with the product. There's lots of ways to get sales level data without actually selling a product.
Oh, yes.
I was talking with a client, a new client I just picked up last month, and we had our first preparation meeting, and we started talking about, they're 18 months from getting FDA clearance. And we're saying, well, listen, let's start testing Mark. And they asked me, how are we going to do it? Well, let's start testing our messaging. He goes, well, we can't sell product. I said, no, but go put a blog out there and start talking about the problem.
That's what we're doing. We're doing that right now with an assessment product. We're going to bring to market an assessment product, and we've been testing the messaging against customers. We've been testing the positioning with customers across 4 geographies, which has been really cool. So
what have you learned? What mistakes are you avoiding already?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things we learned first and foremost was that we can't go forward with the assessment. We have to go forward with reporting, because it's not the assessments that people want. It's the fact that the reports are the value that they get out of this. So we were facing with assessment instead of the report. The other thing is that
so now you're gonna, with your messaging, you're gonna lead with the report.
Yeah, these are all the reports you can get. You can report on someone's emotional intelligence, their leadership capabilities, all these really cool things, right? So that's the other thing.
A whole bunch of messaging stuff that you've already figured out, and you haven't even started selling the product yet.
Yes, but we have been pitching it as prototype. But this is the feedback we're getting out. I just got some feedback about security, so making sure that what's the secure nature of the data that's being housed. So that was really interesting. So, and we're still in the pre gathering information stage, but it's amazing to watch how this thing is maturing. But the biggest problem, though, Chris, with our company is that we still have to do a big bang, because at some point, in order to get the best possible margin, we're going to have to buy a bunch of preset licenses. So we're most likely going to do that.
Got it. You have to buy licenses so you can train on that.
Yeah, what happens is that the assessment is a single license, right? So if you buy them in bulk, the price for the license goes down, so your retail price creates more
So
margin.
David, this is my advice to you. Keep asking your questions. What's the next question I can ask before? What's the next question I can ask? Keep de-risking this before I make that commitment, if you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's exactly right. That's what I tell you what, the product manager in this deal, she did a phenomenal job of working with every region, GM and sales group to really, and then she created this mirror board, dude, that is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
That with all this information, so what you're able to do is you're able to slice and dice the information and test this information up against your audience to see how they react to the different pieces. And that's what's proven to be successful. And I've never seen this before. I've never seen a product manager just spew out so much stuff in a logical way that the sales teams can actually dig into it, ask questions, watch parts of it being utilized, and then decide which elements are better for their region. It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. But in this day and age, we're able to do more and more of these type of things before we go to launch. But then also once you start selling, we got to start doing these things too, because your messaging, you got your marketing tactics, what you learn don't go with the big bang marketing, bro. Go build.
Well, that's it. Here's another thing that's great about this assessment product, Chris. We're not going scalable right now. We're doing exactly what you say. We're doing an agile market entry. We're going after specific customers that we think have relevance. We're offering different incentives to see if they'll jump on board, what's going to drive them. We're truly practicing your model. At some point, we're going to have to find a scale model, but I'm not even worried about that right now. I just want to start seeing how people are going to react and where I can put this and position it.
It's not worth worrying about scale right now because you're going to have to go through a sequence of steps before you ever get to figure out when you can scale. First one's what you're trying to figure out. What are people actually going to respond to, and how do we test that response to at least start getting leads and qualified leads in the door? Once you start doing that, then you got to figure out the sales process, right? And then you got to figure out how to deliver it so they become a satisfied customer, which you're probably great at knowing that. But until then, you don't have it. You need all those pieces before you get scalable.
You just got to find a way to do it fast and at scale
And the way to do it fast, the fastest way you do is create little experiment. Well, first do what you're doing, lead with de-risking it before you launch, testing as much as you possibly can. Then when you get to go through quick experiments to test as quickly as possible and allow you to do multiple pivots, right, to get the scalability. I mean, you're doing the right things. The problem is this all takes time. It all takes money. And it's one of the hardest things to do in business is to figure this stuff out. So it's always going to take time. It's always going to take money. The problem is when we do it the other way you talked about, the time and money is escalated 10x compared to what you're going to be doing, what you're doing now.
So tell us about a failure. We got a few more minutes left. You dropped out on us.
Let's talk about this story. So I was talking with a friend of mine that he used to work for Hillrom, the big bed company selling in the hospitals. A lot of people in this will know about Hillrom. So we were talking in the store, and he said, and we were talking about the story, or the title of my story is, just buy it. Just acquire the innovation.
Uh-huh.
And the thing that he told me about it, because Chris, we've never brought in a new product and done well with it. We've always struggled with it. And so and they're in the middle of doing right now. They're bringing in a new product. He's heading up a lot of the work, and he's picking my brain every day.
Yeah. 1 + 1 hardly ever equals 2, man. I have been through a lot of acquisitions, especially big companies, small company, bringing the small company in, expecting 1 + 1 = 2, 2.5, 3, and man, it always equals 1.7 or 1.8.
Yeah.
It just never has happened.
So, and this is a big pet peeve of mine, David, because I don't work in big companies yet. I'm starting to try to work in some of them. I'm talking to my friend a lot about this. 1 + 1 in this scenario should add up to 15.
Of course, that's why you're buying it. Like
exactly.
It's a return on capital. You buy a company, it's basically an investment for return on capital, and most people are going to do
10x, 15x return on it. And
if
you're
you
saying 1 + 1 never adds up to 2, without always adds up to less. But and the reason why is all the things you and I are talking about. Fundamentally, now I think there's some cultural things in big companies that make this more difficult than doing it in a startup environment, for sure.
There is.
And but if you look at the rationale and the numbers, it should equal 15. First of all, here's an interesting statistic for you, David. In big companies, 86% of new product launches are incremental. Only 14% are disruptive or innovative.
Yeah.
Now, here's the second piece of that puzzle. That 14% generates 61% of margin or profit. Mm-hmm. So right there, if you launch a big product, you have and you have some success, you're already 5 times ahead of launching an incremental product.
Yeah.
So that's number one. So if we do what you and I are talking, but big companies aren't designed to operate at this discovery stage that you and I are talking about.
Not at all.
Unless operate at execution scale stage. So they bring in the big product. This is why 1 + 1.
Well, Cisco did something interesting. They would do spin outs. So they would actually take a couple of the engineers who really know what's going on, set them up with some seed money, and then let them operate to do their thing outside the mothership.
But David, that doesn't make sense either.
Why not?
I'm going to fight. So it makes sense.
I think it makes fantastic sense.
It makes sense for the spin out. But here's the problem with that. So if you look at the startup, what doesn't a startup have? They don't have contacts or customers. Yeah. They don't have customers. They don't have reach into the marketplace. What does a big company have?
They have customers, but disrupted, not necessarily the right customer.
That's never true. There's always in your existing customer base, if you're launching a disruptive product and you're in the similar or close markets to what you're in, there's a portion of that customer base.
It's hard to jump here, but the skinny is it's hard to jump stovepipe. It's easier to jump stovepipes in a startup. So here's what the best scenario would be: spin out, give them access to your customer list.
Yes, that would be ideal.
And I think they probably do that. I don't know the details.
No,
I know
this. They've done. I did it early in my career. I was working a side company. I tried to do it with Lucent Technologies. They don't. No, they think that customer is theirs, and they don't want to share that. They don't do that.
I hear what you're saying.
But they don't know how to exploit.
But I will tell you though, it's hard within a large Fortune 500 company, with a good relationship, to jump stovepipes.
I get that.
It is hard.
But David, it's absolute stupidity.
I get you. It's just
I think. But this is what we got to break into. So first of all, you got and that's only the tip of the iceberg, is the higher margin it delivers. It's 5x on margin over a 5-10x on margin over an incremental product. So if you have any type of success from a bottom line standpoint, it's a huge win. But here's the other thing, David, and this is the real the part of the iceberg that's under the water. How you break in? So you're in a big market, and you got 3 major players competing for that market. Each one's carved up, and each one has 20%, and then you have all these little players to take up the other 40%, something like that. And these 3 big players are fighting over 20%. They each have 20% of the marketplace. So how do they gain market share? You don't gain market share by out hustling, because why do you have relationships with that 20% of the marketplace? It's the relationship. It's not the products. We all know this. How do you break relationships from a stronghold competitor account? There's only one freaking way to do it. It's to bring in something disruptive that solves a critical problem that they can solve. So
Chris, I just talked about this with someone the other day. I go, really, at the end of the day, you trying to steal market share is a challenge unless you have something that's different.
That's different.
The only thing I could do is offer a lower price. At the end of the day, it's either my buddy took a role in that company and they're willing to take me in.
Yep.
Or I have a price that, what do you call it? I have product you can't refuse. I do the Godfather on them.
Yeah, ads from Verizon, and what's the competitor to Verizon right now?
Oh, there's all of them. T-Mobile,
T-Mobile, and T-Mobile's often free iPhones. All they can do is compete on price. But the way you actually compete and take market share is delivering disruptive technologies that solve problems. This is the other reason. This is the other reason why these big companies should be figuring out how to do this internally.
Well, they're already seeing the issues. I mean, the companies should be able to stay on the S&P 500 for 50, 60 years.
Sure.
Right now, a company on the S&P 500's average lifespan on that index is like 12.
Yep, and they have all these innovative programs. They have all these consultants coming in how to do innovation, but they miss the one step of the process. They don't at the very, I read a mile on innovation, the last mile. Well, this is the last yard, and the last yard is actually how you sell to customers and how you effectively sell to customers.
Just don't use your damn current sales process. That's really
they can't, and they shouldn't even be using They shouldn't even be using their own salespeople. They should.
Hello, Chris. Can I help you?
They should have a special team that just does this type of work. So, but this is a conversation I was having with my friend at Hillrom. They don't know how to bring in disruptive technology. They're not stuck. But you can do it in these big companies if they can get out of their way. And if they do, that 1 + 1 will actually turn into 15.
Yeah, these are the stories that
1 turn into 1.7 and a failure.
You usually hear about it as pirate ships, like rebel tiger teams, subgroups working within a company that's got pure CEO blessing, and they can do whatever the hell they want. And the story of Steve Jobs and the pirate ship flag in the middle of Apple when he came back. But anyways, we're over our 30 minutes. Anything you want to share before we adios?
Well, just good to be back on here with you, David. It's always
fun. It's so nice to be with you too, my brother. All right, folks, have a great one.
The other thing is, everybody have a happy holidays. I'm going to take a siesta on this until after the first of the new year, but we'll be back again going strong in January. But
excellent.
All right, holiday season.
Happy holidays.